Hi, hello. Day 7, they are flying by, at least for me. I hope you had a wonderful awareness through movement lesson, commonly called ATM by us Feldenkrais people, with Era Feely this morning. Just 90 minutes ago, she was leading a lesson she called the Rolling Chariot, which is kind of fun. So if you didn't do it, you can still catch that on replay. And I want to remind you to get acquainted with the platform, look around a little bit, find chat, and start having a little conversation with each other, introducing, seeing who you know over there. By now, day 7, you might actually feel like you know some of these people that in day 1 were complete strangers. And even if you're here for the first time, feel free to hop in and talk with each other. Arlene Klein is over there, our summit coordinator, and she will be introducing herself and also posting some helpful links throughout the track. And if you have questions or problems, you can let her know. This is the second talk in our Structure and Tensegrity track, and on architecture, landscape, and somatics. So I'm Cynthia Allen, if you didn't know that by now. This is the Feldenkrais Awareness Summit, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you Auxiliadora. I've been trying to practice her full name, even though she tells me I can call her Oxy. Auxiliadora Galvez. And Oxy is from Cordoba, Spain. She's an architect by ETSAM, and a PhD in architecture since 2012. She's also a teacher in the Feldenkrais method from the Feldenkrais Institute, and she teaches in EPS, San Pablo CEU University. She developed her PhD research at ETSAM about choreography as an experimental laboratory for architecture in terms of space, atmosphere, and creative tools. And for this research, she won a grant in 2010 from EPS, CEU, and the Santander Bank to stay and work at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna for 6 months. Her PhD work was also awarded a mention in the national competition of Arquia Thesis 2013. In 2016, she founded the Platform of Somatic for Architecture and Landscape, what she calls PSAAP. She has been distinguished in national and international contests, highlighting the first degree prize received in Europan 6 in Cordoba, Landscape Award in Ciudad La Bianta International Competition. Oh, I know I'm really making a mess of those. The first degree prize in Europan 7 in Murcia, and first degree prize in Celebration of Cities, UIA, in the local and national stages. So she has many awards, and the rest even get harder for me to pronunciate. And her work has also been published in National Artificial by Exit.lmi, in the journals UHF, Bouvalt, Soma Plus, 2G, and several more. And these days, she works in landscape and architecture, mostly associated to an embodiment point of view. And that's what we're really going to be hearing about from her today, is how these worlds come together. And she's on the Faculty of Architecture at the University of Madrid. Is that correct? Did I get that right? Yeah?
Yes.
Welcome, Oxy.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, and welcome to all the audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a challenging talk for me, I think. So I feel like this is something I know. I mean, I know something about the embodiment piece, but I really know nothing about architecture. So I'm looking forward to hearing about your creative work and giving us a really different feel in this track that we have called Structure and Tensegrity. So, yeah, so why don't you just get us started? Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you made it into Feldenkrais and how you made it into architecture.
Yeah, well, I have to say that from the beginning, my approach to architecture was always related to perception and movement in the space, because I love to dance since I was a kid. So since the beginning, these two walls were only quite one for me. So I was thinking it's really interesting how dancers experience space. And that's why when I was finishing my studies and I decided to develop a PhD, I decided to research actually how dancers and architects were having or not similar spatial conceptions or similar tools in order to create choreographies or architectures. So I developed this PhD research, and it was in these states that I was having in Vienna, in Austria, in 2010, that I came to know the Feldenkrais method. I was in the Academy of Fine Arts, and that summer was the Impulse Dance, the festival in Vienna, and I went to a workshop by a colleague, Malcolm Manning, and he was dealing with Feldenkrais, but really relating to space the whole time, so relating body and space. And I realized the Feldenkrais method was going to be really useful when you come to a pedagogical environment of architecture. I was already teaching at the university. And in order to allow the students to experience some of the concepts that I was explaining about architecture, to allow them to experience by themselves, I realized that the Feldenkrais method could be really useful, because it's really a method with patterns of action that we can really, let's say, analyze, and it's always working with perception, the nervous system, with our skeleton, our structure, which is also very architectonical, and the environment and the space which is surrounding us. So that's why I started to study also Feldenkrais, and now I develop a program at the university where we learn architecture issues through Feldenkrais lessons also.
Yeah. So it's interesting because many people come into the work from a need to heal something, or because they just generally love movement, which of course you also did, obviously, as an answer. But I like this idea that what really grabbed you was this ability to explore the space around, the relationships between objects or self and space, and that was what really caught your attention. That's a nice and different entry point.
Yeah, at the end is if I want to design an environment for people, for me it's interesting to understand how people relates with the environment. So I'm interested in how perception works, how movement works, and in that way I can design, let's say, with more knowledge or more richness somehow. That's why. And also I think when you come to embody it or to experience by yourself, some ideas are also easier to be developed in theory or in your practical job. So that's,
yeah, so when you have a clear idea and experience of it yourself, it's easier to put into action. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
Good. Well, you also presented this last year at the Harvard Conference on Movement. I forget their exact name this last year. And so that grabbed my attention, and I would love to see some of your presentation that you put together for us today.
Yeah, sure. Yes, in Harvard, what I was presenting was the development of this program that I have at the university since 2016. So if you want, I just put the presentation.
Yes.
And we can go through it to
Yes.
see some details. Yeah, I guess now we are on it. The program is related to the somatics for architecture and landscape. Let me see, because it's not working, it's not going ahead. No, why? Yeah, so the lecture I would like to share with you now is about this program I have in the university in Spain about somatics for architecture and landscape. And I was, as I was introducing minutes ago, everything started with my PhD research about dance and architecture. And you can see some image of it here. I was comparing along the 20th century spatial conceptions and creative methods that were shared in between choreographers and architects. So they were working with similar tools. Choreographers were working with ideas about atmosphere, and later architects started to do the same. Also ideas about nature, about gesture, about tactile experiences of a space, about fantasy, or about time. So they were sharing a lot of knowledge, and I realized this was very useful to actually learn architecture. So indeed, I was wondering myself how much embodied could we learn in architecture, or in a more general sense, could be interesting when you come to study spatial disciplines, to do it in an embodied way. So through the direct experience of your body in a space. And for this, let's say that I found some antecedents in some pedagogical theories. For example, the one developed by John Dewey about experience and education, and also the one developed by Donald Schoen about how some professionals actually think in action. It's not that they prepare in advance, but they think along the way. And for these two authors, John Dewey and Donald Schoen, learning is related to a situation, and a situation is related to interaction. So we are always reacting to this situation of learning. And for them, embodied experience or personal experience, it was really important, because they were studying how in the same frame for learning, different people, different individuals, they learn different things, or they can develop with different lines of interest. So in this way, they were creating platforms for learning that were related to real situations. So no theory before and then one day you will apply it, but just how to learn involved meanwhile you do. So it's more, let's say, the learning is more integrated. It's not separated theory from practice. So this was kind of inspiration for this laboratory at the school. But also in architecture in itself, we have a couple of references that I was finding really wonderful, and I would like to share with the audience. First is the life of Buckminster Fuller. Buckminster Fuller is, by the way, the one who spoke about tensegrity in first time. So he was born cross-eyed. So when he was a child, he was not able to see details, but he was seeing general patterns. When he was 4 years old, his parents put glasses, realizing that there was a problem. So he was able to see already details and without any problem. But somehow he says that this way of seeing the world and the universe through patterns and not through isolated details remain. So in this way, he started to develop what he was calling teleology. So he was defining this as the capability of experiencing some specific case in first person, and the capability to extrapolate this knowledge to other systems that is more generic. So the capability to extract some laws from your personal experience was the one who was making him to discover a lot of things and to be also learning by himself. Here you can see, for example, how the shape of the fish is similar to the one of the Zeppelin, or how this balloon has the shape of the carrots when they go into the air. So somehow these ideas about seeing some system of forces, for example, like we see in these structures, and to apply them to others was his, let's say, natural way to deal with his profession, but also with his life. Actually, the embodied experience was for him, I think, really important in order to see the world through these patterns, because he was a sailor and a pilot. So he was understanding the world through this embodiment. So he was understanding ecological systems and, let's say, movement systems through his own experience. And this was recorded in his diary. He was having almost 750 volumes when he died, because he recorded every event he was experimenting, from the most quotidian, from the most exceptional, let's say. So in this way, he was translating always discoveries that he was doing in nature, through architecture, or in some systems to another. The second example is coming from Italy, and it's about what they were calling an anti-school of architecture. It was called Global Tools, and it was done by radical architects. They were called like that in the 70s. And they were thinking the School of Architecture is not the place to learn architecture. We have to create a school called Global Tools, which is related to life as a place for education. So life, it was giving the global tools to learn whatever, but specifically architecture. So in these images, you can see the manifesto they were doing and how they were relating to mainly 5 concepts, from one that was especially important, and it was the body. So they were talking about body construction, communication, survival, or theory, from the body and how the body was interrelated with all this. And they would create workshops where they were dealing with the human body like a tool and dealing with restrictions for the body, but also seeing how through somatics or movement or rituals and how the body was understood in different cultures, they would come to know about architecture, but situated in culture, in theory, in relation to environment. So let's say the body and the somatic approach was having a lot of weight in this way of learning architecture. I could just remark these workshops with kids that they were doing. Ricardo Dalisi was developing these workshops where they were really focused in how kids could build things really on the way, not planning it in advance, but reacting, thinking in action through their embodied experience on site. So somehow this was...
I want to do that.
Yeah, me also.
You need to have a workshop for adults to do that.
Yeah, you can come to my university. We can organize something.
Oh, good.
So with these antecedents, and concerning our laboratory, which is called LASAP, Laboratory of Somatics Applied to Architecture and Landscape, we came to decide to research 3 things. The first one, if it would be possible to develop structural thinking, so how architects develop their knowledge about the structural calculation and understanding of structures with the help of their embodied, let's say, experience. So this was the first line of research. The second, if improving proprioception, we could also develop better spatial skills in order to perceive in a more accurate way the spaces, but also to design them, let's say, in a more ergonomic way. And third, also if in some theoretical lessons, we could include some embodied experiences in order to integrate better the theory that we were giving. So if we start with the structural part, which is actually main issue in this track, we were really interested in the ideas of Mark Johnson. Mark Johnson is a philosopher, and he studied also cognition. And he was developing the idea that when you experience in your own body different circumstances, you generate what he called image schemata. So for example, if I feel equilibrium, I have this image schemata is a kind of basic structure of what equilibrium means.
So did you say image schemata?
Image schemata, yeah. And then through what he calls metaphorical projection, I can apply it to other systems. For example, if I can feel balance, I have this image schemata, and I can, let's say this image schemata is at the basis of my meaning, of my understanding, so I can say Cynthia is a very balanced person, for example. So I extrapolate this embodied experience to other contexts, and I could extrapolate also to other systems, so I can understand physical conditions of equilibrium, for example. So he developed this idea that if you embodied some of these schemas, and here in this map you can see some of them, like the relationship in between center and periphery, equilibrium, in and out, so different, let's say, very simple relations that we experience through our movement. Then through this metaphorical projection, I can understand better, like Buckminster Fuller was doing, through these patterns, other realities. So what if our students would understand better their biomechanics involved in their skeleton through these Feldenkrais lessons? The question was if they would understand better structural calculations and architectonical structures. So we generate in 2016 this lab, and different students were involved. At the beginning they were like almost 30, and they were coming more or less in a phased way in between 15 and 20. And we developed these Feldenkrais lessons together with some other theoretical inputs, but the idea was exactly this one, to make them to have the experience about movement when they were applying forces in their skeleton in different ways, and then to try to feel these same circumstances in other systems that, for example, like in these photos, they could build on the way somehow. So once you have felt in yourself some relationship of balance, why don't you cannot build something with the same conditions somehow? And to test if this really was working, we decided to make a collection of tests together with the professors of structures of the university, that they were at the beginning very intuitive. To see some of the images of the tests here, we were asking questions about the understanding of these systems. Some of them were buildings, some of them, as you see, about sailing or different situations. And we were asking only true or false answers. We decided to make these tests to three different groups. Students coming to our laboratory, students from the Feldenkrais Institute in Madrid. They didn't study structures before, but they were having this somatic knowledge. So we were thinking maybe they have this intuition about the structures. And then a group of control that was not having any training in structures, neither in somatics.
Okay, so in the first group that was part of the architecture school, were they also getting the somatic experience?
Yes.
Okay,
exactly.
So the first group was architecture basis with somatics. Then you had the Feldenkrais group that was basically just somatics. They had no architectural training. And then your control group was?
They were having no idea about the structure, no idea about somatics.
Okay, got it.
Because the first group, they were students of architecture, but never trained in somatics. This test was done at the beginning of the laboratory. So they were not having any somatic knowledge at the time.
At the time. Mm-hmm.
The results were that students of architecture of last years and Feldenkrais students were having similar marks, you see in the screen, 6.29 and 6.25, really similar. But the groups never trained in those areas, they were having less mark, 569. So it was somehow an intuition about how this could be developed. So we developed the whole year working with our students in somatics with Feldenkrais lessons. And at the end of the course in May, we repeat another test with similar questions, as you see. And this time, the Feldenkrais students, they remained the same. The level of the test was the same, so they didn't receive any new, let's say, classes about structures. But the students of architecture learning at the university together with the combined option of somatics and conventional learning, they increased in more than 1 point their results. This was the first year. So we were thinking, okay, especially professors of structures, they were saying, maybe it was too intuitive. Let's test if we ask some more detailed answer, almost also including some operation with numbers. So they were asking actually some results from the people doing the test. Let's see what happened. So as you see, this second GR test was more difficult. It was including also some diagrams relating body structures and architectural structures. And the students were asked to give a number, a solution, really concrete, not true and false anymore, but they had to really understand. The surprise thing was that this time we chose 2 groups of students of architecture, one involved in our laboratory, one out of our laboratory, of the same level, the students. And then the students from the Feldenkrais Institute that they were participating the year before. What happened is that students of architecture failed the test with 4.5 over 10, but Feldenkrais students remain with the same mark, like 6.25. So we were thinking, okay, maybe as normally we teach structures only in architectural context, when you have to extrapolate this knowledge, sometimes you miss the point. You don't understand really how to apply this knowledge achieved in a theoretical way to other systems. So we decided, okay, so let's see what happened with 1 year of this somatic, let's say, training in parallel.
So in this second phase, the students in architecture were not getting the somatic experience. Is that correct?
We had 2 groups of students of architecture. One taking the somatic laboratory and one without the somatic laboratory.
And in both situations, the students taking the somatic and the ones who were not basically scored the same.
But this was at the beginning of the year. So at the beginning of the year, none of them were having somatic lessons.
This is the baseline. This is our baseline.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. So we made this at the beginning. None of them were having somatic learning. We did another test in the middle of the year, like in January, that we are going to see now, and another at the final. So at the middle of the year, we decided to increase difficulty to see if also Feldenkrais students could have some weak points somehow. So we decided to add drawing. So what if you have to analyze a situation through the diagram of forces that are happening? For example, here you see these dancers in equilibrium, which would be the correct diagram of the 3 that you have below to choose according to the situation. And you see sometimes they had to actually draw the whole diagram. For example, the diagram of this sculpture on the left side, how would be to maintain equilibrium. And what happened is that yes, this time drawing was more abstract or more, let's say, specific knowledge, and Feldenkrais students were failing the test. But students of architecture, after one semester of somatic lessons, the ones involved in our laboratory, they improved their marks in almost 1 point, so they passed this time the test. But the students of architecture not involved at the laboratory, they were worse. They decreased somehow the marks. This again was a little bit surprising for professors of structures, because of course you think the knowledge you give is integrated and they can do this kind of simple issues, but we came to realize that it's not so simple when you have to apply to other system that is not the habitual one. So at the end of the course, we make a mix of all this way of asking, and we made again some questions to the students of the laboratory of somatics to see if their knowledge would be better this time. And indeed, they improved their marks in 2 points. So it was also very interesting because some students of architecture that never had good skills in structures, they were thinking about themselves, I'm not able to do this. Some of these were the best in this test after 1 year and a half. So we came to realize that it was also another way. It's not only a way of make a complementary, let's say, education or way of integrating the knowledge, but also for somebody was easier to go through this path and then achieve, of course, through the other classes, the knowledge. So this was quite interesting, and it's still one line of our research somehow at the school. And just to finish, I will tell you about the other 2 lines. So what about proprioception skills, for example? We were understanding proprioception in a wide sense, like Gibsonian psychologists do, which is the combination of all the sensorial information that gives you a sense of your position in a space. So we would do also some tests at the beginning and at the end of the year. And the tests were coming, some of them from medical testing about balance, with tests like Hunterberger or Varani, which are quite well known in medical approaches, but also through some ATMs where you have to locate some points in the space without vision, and these kind of things. We were testing if their knowledge about locating points in the space without vision was increased. One of the things we could do, for example, was to walk around a space. At some point, we would ask them to stop and maybe to tell them, okay, with closed eyes, try to envision the distance from your location to some reference of that space, and say it, for example, in your height, how many times your height is repeated till you reach that point. So they would say it loudly, and then we would actually measure the reality. And we would compare at the beginning and at the end of the year if this, let's say, sensorial perception of the space was more accurate in relationship with their measurement, with their bodies. And it was quite irregular, this study, because for some of them was really changing a lot during 1 year, and for some others not so much. But in general, almost most of them were improving their skills in the 60% of the test. So we think in this way that if you are able to recognize better these dimensions, you can design with more knowledge about ergonomics and human scale. We are not able to measure this so exactly, but we think it's a useful input.
Can you explain what irregular quantity means I'm sure that's something that if you say it another way, I'll understand.
Yeah, it was that, for example, if we were having 10 different tests or trials of these, maybe in one kind of test they were improving a lot, but in some other they were almost not improving.
Okay.
So depending on the task, it was irregular in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And to finish, I find this interesting to be able to apply also your own experience when you are listening to a theoretical lesson. I will give 3 examples. For example, we have this lecture that I explained them about synesthesia and experiments of sound and color in art and architecture. So I would explain them in a theoretical way, some examples and some ideas about how synesthesia works. And then, for example, we could do an ATM of the Feldenkrais lesson. There is one called painting the left side. So we could do this to experience, I don't know, this experience of color in half of your body, and then add some music and to be aware if this perception changes with the rhythm of the music and the nuances. And then we even asked them, okay, can you make a photo of your experience? So we were bringing some lanterns and transparent, colorful issues, and they were creating like similar experiences that the one they had felt. Another example of this, we would explain, for example, these drawings that are coming from architects at the beginning of the 20th century. And these architects were understanding architecture in a very free way, like membranes that were able to breathe in the environment. So for them, buildings would be not exactly buildings, but interfaces for exchange of temperature, light, and so on. So we were thinking, for example, to relate it to the work of the diaphragm in some ATM lessons like the seesaw breathing. So in this way, they came to know how the muscle, how the diaphragm is, which is quite interesting structurally, also for architects, it's kind of umbrella. And at the same time, to understand how this movement was creating this exchange like a membrane. Or finally, for example, this lecture that I like to give them about ways of understanding imagination. For example, from the most poetical one, we could say Gaston Bachelard, for example. He's an author really looking at imagination through poetics. Or the most contemporary one, I don't know, Sean Gallagher. He's a philosopher talking about imagination through neuroscience. So, for example, Gaston Bachelard, the most poetic one, he says, the opposites concepts enhance imagination. So we would have this Feldenkrais ATM called Small and Tall, in which you have to imagine yourself really, really big, like Alice in Wonderland, or really, really small. And they would understand how there has to be some transition in the coexistence of these two opposites, and how imagination can overlap or can work. Or also as we see in this map, related to some ideas about imagination and invention by Gilbert Simondon, how he's saying that at the root of any invention, there is somehow movement. So it was a way to embody some of the theoretical concepts from philosophers that sometimes are not easy to understand. And we create also some kind of monitoring of this. So I gave this lecture to a group at the university without any ATM lesson. And then to my laboratory, I gave the same lecture and the ATM lesson. 1 week afterwards, I asked them some questions. They didn't know there were going to be some tests or something. So I wanted to know if the ideas about, for example, small and tall present in this ATM, about the opposite concepts and about imagination, if they would remember it as they would have experienced it in their bodies. And it happened that none of the groups actually remember so many concepts, but the ones present in the ATM were remembered. So somehow this is also something interesting to see how through experience you can fix some ideas or to integrate better some ideas. So basically this is our experience, and all these credits are acknowledgements because a lot of people was collaborating, but more or less this is the story.
Thank you very much. So it's a really nice addition to the science around embodied cognition, embodied learning, and which I've read a little bit about, and I couldn't possibly grab any studies off the top of my head, but I know that they've been out there around math and children. Mm-hmm. And so I find it's like a higher level of exploration, because when you're talking about architecture, you're not talking about basic mathematical skills, but now much more complex.
It's the same idea. It's the same idea to be able to integrate experience and also to be able to learn through your own organism. And I think also that makes them feel somehow with an extra value, because they get the skills to learn about very specific things out of their bodies, from their bodies.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah, and it would just be wonderful if someone began to pick up this kind of, picked up your research and really took it into a higher level, larger number kind of study, because it's key, I think, to our educational system is how can we use embodiment to enhance these concepts that we're wanting people to learn. And of course, we know that most of us pretty much forget in our early education our mathematical, physics, geometrical explorations. We don't really know what they have to do with our life later. But here we have an example of how, if we were teaching it in an embodied way, there might be a much stronger carryover in practice.
I think so, yeah. And also a way of, let's say, deeper understanding. Somehow something that you can understand how it's not working only in some reality, but are more general laws.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Soxy. And I think you have a lesson for us that we can do to give us a feel of how you've been exploring with people.
Yes. I would like you to experience a little bit this question of space and your body. I will do it in a, very specific part of your body, is the hands. So thank you, Cynthia, to be my practitioner, my student today. So yes, sit down, close your eyes, and locate your hands in a comfortable position on your legs. And just be aware for a moment of this position. And mainly your hands are facing down or up, or maybe they are on the side. It's okay, whatever their position is. Maybe you can try which is the most comfortable. And just concentrate in the position of your hands and your arms in the space which is hosting you. So take some time just to realize which is the size of your body and specifically of your hands in this space. And now focus in the space really surrounding your hands, mostly the one which is wrapped by your hands. So how is the volume of space that your hands are, let's say, creating? And try to feel how your skin is in contact with this space, the skin of your hands. And bring your attention to your right hand and just try to make a really simple movement, creating a fist with your hand, but really a soft fist. So you close it and open it in a really soft way. And try to envision how the space that the hand is generating somehow or delimiting is changing as you make this simple movement. So you close it really soft and you open it really soft, and your hand is in a comfortable position. So you observe the space, how it's folded when you close your hand and how it's expanded when you open it. And at the same time, maybe you can feel how these configurations of space are related to the movement that you feel within your body. So maybe you feel the waves of this soft movement arriving your shoulder or the upper part of your back. So try to see how this simple movement is generating a space and at the same time some proprioceptive experience for you. Okay, you can rest a little bit if you want. Observe how after this simple movement now, maybe the touch of your hand or the skin that you are attending at is like more aware of the space surrounding, but also of the fabric that maybe is touching in your leg. And now come back to do this soft fist with your hand, with your right hand, but now try to leave the thumb without movement. So the thumb is not going to move, but the rest of the fingers, they close and open in this soft movement. Locate the hand in the most comfortable position. So the thumb, you try not to move it, and it's only the rest of the fingers that are creating these different spatial configurations and movements in your arm. And the next time, you do it with your index finger. So your index fingers is remaining without movement, and the rest of the fingers try to do the fist. It's sometimes difficult to leave the index finger without movement, but just try to concentrate in the softness. And next time, try to do the other way around. So it's only the index finger folding and the rest of the fingers are without movement or almost without movement. And try to see how now is this finger who is penetrating somehow in the space of your hand, and how this movement, really simple movement, is creating some proprioceptive experience in your whole arm, the shoulder, and maybe in the back. Okay, now try to alternate. So once you close only the index finger, once you leave the index finger unfold, and you close with the rest of the fingers. So once you do in one way, and the index finger is not moving, but the rest of the fingers, and next time you do it the other way around. Okay, leave it. Leave it and have this awareness if something is different. Just observe. And also, if you are with closed eyes, try to see if in your perception, your relationship with the space, in relation with your hand and the size of the room, is the same, or is something different in the side of the right hand, or if you can just feel some more clear or more blur impression about the measures of your hand. Come back and now choose another finger, not the thumb, not the index. Some of them are quite difficult, but choose another one and just try to do the fist without moving that specific finger. So for example, if you choose the middle one like Cynthia, try not to move the middle one and try to open and close the fist in a very soft way with the rest of the fingers. Maybe you need to do it really slow or really small in order to be able to have this ability. If it's moving, it's not a problem, just be aware of it. And maybe you can even imagine the movement without doing it, and maybe in this way it's easier to have this in advance, this perception about how it would be to move all the 4 fingers but the middle one, doing this fist and unfolding it. And maybe the next time you do the opposite, so the rest of the fingers stay unfold and it's only your middle finger folding and unfolding inside the space of your hand. And have a look about how the movement of the middle finger is creating a kind of experience in yourself, in your whole self. Check your breathing. Sometimes this can be a little bit challenging, so check that your breathing is fluid and you have softness in your hand. Maybe the movement is really small, it's not a problem. And if you feel in the mood, just alternate. So once is the middle finger folding and the rest of the fingers, they don't move. And the next time, the middle finger stays without moving and the rest of the fingers open and close in this fist that is creating different proprioceptive experiences for you in your body, but at the same time different spatial configurations because of the relationships of your fingers, in between your fingers. Okay, you can leave it and rest. Maybe you can try to do now this soft fist with all your hand that we're doing at the beginning, just to see how it's now. And try to be aware not only of the movement in your body, but also of the space, how the space, you are touching it and you are like making a kind of a sculpture, dynamic sculpture when you open and close your hand. Okay, I think maybe it's enough because we could do some more variations, but I think maybe to leave some space, maybe we can finish here. What do you think, Cynthia?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah,
very
you're welcome.
Very interesting. And yesterday we had a lesson from Elizabeth Behringer on martial arts and Feldenkrais, and she gave a lesson about the space around us. So I like and how we reach into space. And here you gave a lesson about feeling how we're changing the space around us. So a very different image, but also very pertinent.
I think so. Yeah, it's very interesting how to change the focus of attention. For example, to think that you move in a space, or to feel that the space is somehow moved by your
right. That I'm displacing, even though it may not seem like it. I'm displacing molecules. I'm displacing something.
Yeah, that is nice. You have a different kind of perception.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of a lesson in my training, which I've always wanted to recreate, but I haven't yet. And I'm pretty sure it was Paul Rubin who taught it, but who knows, I might have made it up, in which by the time the end of the lesson was done, I could feel the walls breathing around me.
That is nice.
Like the walls breathing, the ceiling breathing, the floor breathing, everything was breathing. And you can just keep changing your perceptual orientation.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
take in different aspects or more or less or shifting positions.
Yeah, actually there is a very beautiful writing by Mary Wigman, the expressionist dancer of the in between the 20s and the 60s, and she was describing her experience in what a dance called wheel dance. So it was a kind of twist dance, always rotating. And she was saying, at some point, I was at the center, like in a quiet pole in the vortex of rotation. And it was not me anymore rotating, but it was the whole world rotating. And I was in the quiet pole in the middle. Mm-hmm. So it's also very interesting to see how you can also change the reference point of observation. If you are rotating, maybe, yes, you are in the center and it's the quiet pole and it's the whole space. Weirdly, yeah, it's beautiful experience.
Lovely. Oxy, this theme has been the map is the territory, and so we're asking speakers to tell us what would they like to do with their own personal map or the map of their field next. What ideas do you have for yourself that you'd like to change either in your own personal life or in your field or work?
Yes, I think that the best ideas for a map for me would be to include changes in our life, not through crisis, because normally when we are in crisis we change, but to do it through imagination related to reality. So to try to include changes and, let's say, to try that our habits are growing and are not static. I think that to have a dynamic map would be the best or at least I understand it like that, for professional issues, personal issues, and the rest.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So I really appreciate having you here. This talk will be available for up to 48 hours after this. It usually takes us about 2 hours to get it up, and then it'll be available for 48 hours. And if you happen to be interested in upgrading for the All Access Pass, where you can watch all the talks at your leisure and get transcripts, which I think the transcripts will be really helpful for people who are trying to navigate between languages, to be honest. So where you're having, maybe you understand English somewhat better by reading than maybe you do hearing, or you could go back and forth between watching, or even for those of us who are English speaking but listening to someone with an accent, sometimes the transcripts can be extra helpful. So it just gives an extra point of view. And I actually like transcripts because I can go back and reference them really quickly and grab things that I want to have for a presentation or something I'm writing, where a video takes me a lot longer to go through. An audio takes me a lot longer to go through. But you can actually download the videos and audios as well. That's all available in the All Access Pass. You can still get that for $25 off if you do it while the summit is going. Also, Oxy has offered a bonus material, which I would say is more oriented towards Feldenkrais people. I don't know that people who aren't Feldenkrais practitioners could use it a lot, but Oxy, could you say something about that bonus package that you've given us? Because it's pretty interesting.
Well, the bonus material is a collection of drawings similar to the ones you have seen in the presentation. So they are 5 maps about theories of imagination that I was commenting also a little bit. But you have the 5 authors with which I was dealing, also the bibliography of this author, and also the ATMs lessons that come to, let's say, to establish some parallelism. So if somebody's interested in the topic of imagination, the drawings are also in quality up to be printed. So maybe it's also, I don't know, maybe somebody wants to print them also, and also is this knowledge about some theories of imagination and ATM lessons that could make like a partnership.
Right. And it's really a lovely presentation. As you probably noticed in her drawings, they're quite gorgeous and interesting just to look at them in some detail and spend some time with them. And I've been, as you know, I've been saying that the bonus material is worth over $500. I didn't count Oxy's wonderful material in that calculation because it's more oriented towards Feldenkrais practitioners. So there is over $500 worth of lessons and documents, resource material that is valuable for everyone. And then there's this incredible package from Oxy that's primarily oriented for Feldenkrais practitioners. So there's a lot in there. Also, at noon today, we'll be talking with Dr. Robert Schleip, who has admittedly been living in at least two worlds until the last 10 years and then started into a third world. So amazingly, many people do not even know that Dr. Schleip is a Feldenkrais practitioner in the Feldenkrais world, which is really a shame. And he is going to be talking about this intersection of Rolfing, Feldenkrais research, and fascia. And I think you'll really enjoy it. And then following that will be a panel discussion between myself, Anastasia Sigotas, and Stefan Elgled. And so we've got lots still coming up, even here at day 7. So hope that you'll stay with us.
It's really nice. And also I was lucky to listen a lecture by Galvez last year, and I really enjoyed it. His knowledge is really great. I encourage everybody to join us.
Thank you. It is really great. And I think this is a really interesting track when you consider all of the 3 presenters together. So I'm looking forward to the panel discussion on that. And I don't know, maybe you'll be able to stick around for it, Oxy, and join us in the chat area of the panel discussion.
Yeah, I will be.
Thank you so much, Oxy. Really appreciate having you. And I know it was a bit of a challenge for you to navigate, but you speak beautiful English, and we thank you for rising to the challenge. We have a nice representation this year from Spain, so.
It's true, yeah.
It's
nice that also to be with my colleagues here. Yeah.
Thank you. So for Oxy and I, we're going to say goodbye, and we'll see you in a little bit. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you.